Good evening. I'm Pittsburgh City Councilman Daniel Lavelle,
And I'm Councilman Reverend Ricky Burgess.
and welcome back to Black Pittsburgh Matters. Black Pittsburgh Matters is a series of virtual town hall meetings affirming a citywide agenda that indeed Black Pittsburgh matters. Black Pittsburgh Matters means that Black lives matters. It means we must protect the health and safety of Black people. It means that Black communities matter. We must invest in and rebuild Black communities. And it means that Black wealth matters. We must focus on increasing Black employment and entrepreneurship.
The Black community has been disproportionately affected by twin crises. One, the COVID-19 pandemic and its subsequent economic crisis. And second of all, race relations explosion, which is a public health crisis. Normally, in times of crisis and great change, we'd be coming to you as the Black elected officials of Pittsburgh and having meetings across the city with our constituents, partners, and allies. Since we cannot do this safely in the current pandemic, we're now using this media and platform to come to you in the ways in which we can to discuss what we're doing and discuss policy and legislation concerning Black Pittsburgh. These meetings are available via Facebook, YouTube, and the city's cable channel. You can contact or ask questions via the Black Pittsburgh Matters Facebook page or email us at blackpghmatters@gmail.com. And of course, we're live right now, so you can simply comment through the Facebook page. Today's town hall meeting topic is employment and entrepreneurship. And so I guess I have been, as you know, involved in trying to increase the wages for African Americans. I have been active in the Summer Youth Employment Program because I myself used to work for that program for Park Recreations at Mellon Park during my summers in college. And when I first came to council, it was about $300,000. Now it's over $1.2 million a year, $1.2 million. And we employ now every eligible kid who applies for the program. They are guaranteed a job. And so we're real proud of that program. And we had it this summer despite the pandemic. I tried to get council to pass a living wage. And then what I did recently was have the wage review committee. We did this for hospital workers first, which was one of the saddest things of all the things I've done, where I had hospital workers cry and say that they could not afford, because of the kind of health care the hospital gives them, they could not afford to take their kids to the hospitals that they worked at. And it was just heartbreaking. And we did help to get them higher wages. And then we did the same thing for grocery workers in a subsequent wage review committee part 2. And we got Giant Eagle to increase their wages. And so we believe that in order to live well, not only do you need decent housing, not only do you need a community that's rebuilt, but you certainly need a job, and it has to be a living wage so that you can take care of your kids.
Thank you for that, Rev. If you don't mind, I'd also like to talk a minute about some of the efforts we've been working on within the district. As you're well aware, going all the way back to when I sort of led the effort to tear down the Civic Arena and rebuild the Lower Hill District, the intent behind that development has always been to literally create Black wealth through that development, through the opportunity to actually participate in the physical development itself in terms of being a laborer or a skilled electrician or what have you, but also through the contracting opportunities. What are the opportunities pre-development, development, and post-development where minority companies can actually benefit from this development, and that we can sort of not totally redo the wrongs of 50 years ago, but in many ways lift up this community and create wealth within it. And so I'm excited about it because we're finally in a place where it appears that we're actually going to be able to do that. We did make one historical announcement when we announced that we were going to hire an all minority-owned company to lead the housing on the site, which is a company called Energen, which is a combination of Keith B. Key, Bomani House, and Bob Agbade. They actually came together, created a new company, and they will be leading the housing efforts. And it's obviously our belief and intent for them to also then reach back and hire even more minority-owned companies to participate in that development. But we're also going to have an opportunity very briefly to hear from some others who are involved in this We're in the process of opening up a first source hiring center within the Hill District that'll be able to begin recruiting people to actually begin training for the opportunities that this development will present itself, as well as other opportunities that exist within the city. And I'll let them go into further detail about that. We are also in the process of opening or getting ready to open the Catapult program in the former Shop and Save site, which there's already a very successful one in your district, Reverend Burgess. And so I'm essentially taking your model and replicating it in the Hill District. But what it is, for anyone who's not aware, it's a retailer in residency model where those who cannot afford to have their own storefront come to one location. You can have as many as 10 businesses in there at one time, and thus people can come in and shop. And hopefully they grow their business, they become really successful, and then they're able to venture out on their own and occupy their own storefront somewhere within our great community. And then lastly, I think it's important to note, because you were working on this before I got to council, Reverend Burgess, and then I started working on it. And then together we both started working on it, which is also fixing the city's procurement process itself, and working hard to ensure that more and more minority-owned businesses are actually able to do work with the city, get real contracts, and hopefully grow and expand their businesses.
Yeah, and the Catapult Center in my district is on Highland Avenue next to the Kelly Strayhorn. If anybody wants to go and meet those entrepreneurs and buy some of their goods, certainly you are welcome. Although this is not necessarily our subject tonight, I can't go too much further without really talking with you about my extreme sadness about the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, in front of his 4 kids. I was watching basketball last night and listened to Doc Rivers, the coach of the Clippers, really talk about this in passionate ways. You know, we need to make changes in policy of how policing happens in our country. But I really think that we cannot, and you and I have not, we can't let this moment pass unless we not only change policing, but really deal with those underlying issues, and particularly those issues of housing, economic development in Black communities. And that's partly why this town hall meeting becomes so important, because if we do not, I listen to the Republican convention, if we do not change the living condition of where Black people live, I just don't think we're going to be able to solve this problem. What do you think?
So I'm not sure how many times this has occurred at this point. But last night, my daughter walks up to me as she was getting ready to go to bed, but we had the news on. And she says, "Really? They've killed another Black man again?" Threw up her hands and just walked away. Mm. And literally, I had no comeback. I didn't really know how to respond to it. We've had these conversations, but it's heartbreaking and it's sad. Tragically, here within the city of Pittsburgh, we had a baby die to gun violence recently. And so I'm praying for that family and reaching out to them to do all that we can to assist and help them process their grief. But to your larger point, there are grave underlining issues that affect our community. And thus the topic of this evening is employment and entrepreneurship. And I wholeheartedly believe that we've been having, for 5 years now, an affordable housing conversation in the city of Pittsburgh. We are only having that conversation because people aren't making enough to be able to choose to live wherever they so choose in our great city. And so we have to do whatever we can and partner with the people that are going to join us shortly to ensure that Blacks have every opportunity to economically thrive here in our city, because that will then in many ways begin to take care of these other issues that are unfortunately happening.
Yeah, tonight we are honored to have 5 experts on employment and entrepreneurship, and they are joining us now for the discussion today. We are pleased to have Ms. Carson Williams, Executive Director of the African American Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Long and Mr. Buford from Partner for Work, Mr. Doss, the Editor in Charge of the New Pittsburgh Courier, and Miss Sabrina Mosby, who is the Executive Director of Vibrant Pittsburgh. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
So I'll begin, and I'm gonna start with Ms. Williams, if you don't mind. I was in a Zoom meeting yesterday evening where I said this, and I believe it's true, but I want to sort of double check it. It is my understanding that the most educated person in America is a woman of color. It is also my understanding that the fastest growing entrepreneurial class in our country are also women of color, and specifically Black women. And so, unfortunately, here in the city of Pittsburgh, we also have one of the lowest amounts of Black female-owned businesses. And so I'm just curious to hear from you, and then Ms. Saunders, if you also want to chime in, or whomever for that matter, to learn what can we as a city, one, is my premise correct? Is my premise correct? And then two, if it is correct, what can we be doing to better assist and grow minority-owned businesses, specifically women-owned businesses here within our city? What support levels are needed?
Well, let me respond to your first comment, and yes, you are right. African-American women are more likely to start their own businesses, and that's from a number of issues that have occurred, either from right-sizing out of corporate America or their desire, I'd like to believe, to start their own businesses from what they have seen. There are a number of resources available for women of color to reach out, find resources. A number of them are on with us this evening. Partners for Work does a fantastic job, and I don't think we can ignore that. You also have to look at Vibrant Pittsburgh and the African American Chamber. We all provide resources and can provide them with go-tos. There's a number of city and county resources available, and what we have to do is strengthen them and hold them accountable for making sure that they are doing more to support the effort of getting women businesses in place and helping to support them. It's one thing for them to start a business, it's another thing for them to survive. And we're talking about survival, how to do that.
I agree, and thanks so much for the opportunity to join this evening. As Doris was saying, supporting businesses is the key to their not just survival, but to them thriving and to a thriving economy for our region. At Vibrant, we have been, especially during this time where we've seen an uptick in interest in our corporate leaders and how they can support minority businesses and the Black community specifically. I've been sharing details about the importance of tracking how they are investing in diverse suppliers, diverse businesses here in our region, and creating metrics that will allow them to increase that support. That is the number one way to support women-owned businesses, Black women-owned businesses, minority businesses here in the region, and to ensure their survival. Creating programs, supporting programs that will connect women-owned businesses, Black businesses to their procurement officers and their needs, educating them on the ways to do business with our companies here in the region is also vitally important. And building bridges and relationships. That's something that Vibrant Pittsburgh most certainly is doing and will continue to do, is to build relationships with companies so that higher yield can be realized here in Pittsburgh, and not just service industry type of services, but our legal businesses, right? Our advertising, marketing, things of that nature. Really, the wide array of offerings that Black businesses and that women-owned businesses are providing here in Pittsburgh as well. So we need our companies to help really shoulder this challenge for us as well.
If I can just make a comment to complement what she has said, because of what has been happening, not only the pandemic, but the Black Lives Matter movement and the demonstrations, a number of corporations now recognize the need and are starting to reach out. What the Chamber and other organizations are now doing is helping them to put together a plan and strategy for how to make it successful so that minority businesses grow, and in particular, track that information. We want to be able to look back and see what they have done. So there's an effort underway, and unfortunately, it is caused by current situations, but it is our moment in this environment to seize the opportunity.
So I agree with you wholeheartedly. It is ironic that Pittsburgh, in many publications, is called the most livable city in America, but then we have a city published report that talks specifically about how perhaps for African Americans, this may be one of the worst cities in America. There's a disconnect. And so there are some barriers. And so I'm going to ask first my friend, in many ways, my hero and my role model, Mr. Dawes from the Pittsburgh Courier, to talk a little bit about, from his perspective, barriers. He's been a successful Black businessman, just with the barriers he said he sees. And then I'm going to kind of spin to our friends from the Partners at Work to talk about those barriers to employment and programs that they're running to help people be employed. But Mr. Dawes, what do you think the barriers are? Why don't we have more successful Black businesses?
Well, I think I'm going to just touch back on what was said about the female businesses, which is an accurate statement. There are a great number of successful female-led businesses, women-led businesses, Black women-led businesses. But I'm going to hearken to something that isn't really talked about. And it may be consistent with what's going on across this country, a realistic perception of fear of Black men. And that pervades itself also in business. It pervades itself in the corporate structure. And when we get real about what the issue is here, it's pervasive throughout our common history. We're dealing from something that we're witnessing on a day-to-day basis. The shooting right now out in Wisconsin. What was that all about? You know, we see it every day in everyday occurrence in an interaction with not just police, but vigilantes. Fear of Black men, and I'm putting it straight out there from that perspective. We're not talking about fear of Black women. Most people love Black women, including myself.
Me
but
too.
The reality is there is this undertone, this undercurrent that exists and persists. Let me give you a point of history here. Just recently, several years back, Doris may recall this, there was a story that broke about Black painters who were commissioned to do a job out in, I believe, Mount Lebanon. I could be wrong on that. This woman, the owner of the home said, "I don't want Black men on my property." Am I correct on that, Doris? You seem to recall that particular story? And
yes, I do remember that.
She made the news, but these were very qualifiable. The company stood behind these painters and said they were the best that they had to offer. That didn't matter. They happened to be Black men. So I'm talking about something that most people don't want to talk about. It is something that is historic. It continues to pervade not just the workplace. I'm talking about the corporate structure. Look at the number of Black females in the corporate hierarchy. That's another example. Sure, you have successful Black men, but their challenges come from different perspectives. But I'm just giving you something that my experience, my exposure to listening to stories from Black entrepreneurs, male and female. This is an undercurrent. This is something that happens. Nobody really wants to talk about. It's basically fear of Black men.
So, Mr. Beaver, I'll come back to that because I've had some of that. You know, I'm an old guy, so I've had some of that. Mr. Buford and Mr. Long, talk about in terms of employment. What are the barriers, the challenges in your minds, and then opportunities? We can't hear you for some reason, Mr. Buford.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, here we go. I was going to say, first I'll say good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Before I get into the employment aspect, as a transplant here to Pittsburgh 2 years ago and a former Wisconsinite, I couldn't be more disturbed by something that happened back in near my hometown. So I just want to put that out there and thank you, Reverend Burgess, for raising that and all of our awareness about this. It's beyond tragic, beyond sad, because it keeps happening. So moving on. So at Partner for Work in the Workforce Board, I just want to tell a quick story. But when I came to town 2 years ago, our good friend Sabrina and others threw a reception for me. One, to welcome me to Pittsburgh and to show me who's out there and who my network is. But what was also reminding me is that I'm the first African-American to ever run Partner for Work. And to be honest with you, I was quite shocked that in this day and age to still be the first of anything. So even in the higher levels of things that we're all trying to do and accomplish, we're still the first in some situations. So since I am the first, and we've decided to really push the envelope on what we do as a workforce board and who we start to serve and who we've been honest about who we're serving, including looking at our own contracting and track record as a workforce, as a system, as a company. You know, we're a 48-person, $25 million organization, that's a small business to me. So one of the things we started doing, and I'll come back to the question because I'm not getting away from the question. We had to look at our own things. So we are now in the process of changing how we contract with our vendors. We just switched our vending process for our copiers, for instance. Just something small as that. And we were following other guidelines and not being true to our own desires. So we're looking at everything. We created this Director of Outreach and Inclusion, which Mr. Long is in that position now. And his job on a daily basis is to focus on the things we're talking about and to help keep me focused on these things. So that's why I wanted you to thank you for inviting both of us from Partner for Work and allow us to tag team this conversation. So I just wanted, you gave me the mic, so I took advantage of it for a few minutes. So thank you. Barriers are plentiful, as you know, and there's always an excuse. So one of the other things we've been pushing hard on in our work is getting employers to not think different, but think right about how they bring on people, how they look at talent. You know, we've heard the inflection report and those other things that people are leaving here. Well, we're also forcing people to leave, to look for better opportunity. And so we're pushing hard, and Doris and I have had this conversation recently as well, that getting our corporate citizenry to rethink how they onboard folks, and not just scream they need talent, but help us make this talent. We got nothing but talent here in this area. Some may be returning citizens. Some may have housing issues, but that's some talented individuals. So right now we're doing more than just providing job training dollars. We're trying to partner with as many people as possible to really build this network and supportive service model around this real ecosystem, so that we can take all the excuses off the table, so the employers can't say, well, this is wrong or that's wrong. Like, no, actually, we've taken care of all those barriers already. So there's nothing wrong. There's nothing but talent right here. Marquise, if you want to add anything to that, because I'll just keep rambling. I'm still a little upset about a lot of things that are going on right now.
Yes, again, as Earl had mentioned, thank you all for inviting us to this conversation. So as you know, Councilman Lavelle, Councilman Burgess, you asked the question of what are some barriers as it relates to employment. And I actually had sent Earl a text message some time ago, and I think one of the biggest barriers is, as Mr. Doss had talked about, the fear of Black men. It's here in Pittsburgh, again, I'm a transient as well. The one thing that I have noticed is that even as the workforce board, when employers come to us and they say they have opportunities, they say we need people, and then we hear they can't find people, even when we present them with people. Majority of the individuals that are served through the workforce board are typically minority. But we need the employers to stop saying that there are not candidates, that there are not qualified individuals here in Pittsburgh, because there are, and we present them with those opportunities. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers that we see here, and probably across the country, but definitely here in the city of Pittsburgh, is employers are not holding true to what they say they need when candidates are presented to them.
So
If I can,
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Doris,
I'm
please.
sorry. If I can just add one thing, and incidentally, I'm the president and chief executive officer of the chamber, not the executive director. One of the things that we do is we make sure when we talk with corporations that they can no longer say, we can't find people. We provide them with a network. If they've got opportunities within their companies, we send it out to our 1,100 people in our network. Several people have received jobs through that particular network. We refer them to Partners for Work. We refer them to people that we know have the opportunities there. But it is important that we understand the Rooney Rule is in place in Western Pennsylvania. So as they're looking for candidates, oftentimes they will sidestep the fact of saying they can't find them. Well, who did you actually interview? If you employ the Rooney Rule, you have one minority candidate at least in your final decision-making process for hiring an individual for a job. So I just wanted to put that in there because there are a number of us as organizations that try and provide a network for corporations, nonprofits, and small business owners for that matter. Not necessarily African American, but it could be white small business owners that are looking to hire people. Yeah, we have a network where they can actually contact us and we get the information out for them. What we have to be sure of is that we have a mechanism in place where we can understand how successful these efforts are.
Can I weigh in on something just a little different or in link pretty much with what Doris is talking about? Over the years, as many of you know, we have been showcasing some of Pittsburgh's finest, excellent people, we call them, men and women, throughout the city of Pittsburgh. And we honor them and present them to the city and, of course, the community as well. But the reality is a great number of those people are exposed for the first time to people who have no idea that they either have the background, the degrees that they have, the tenure of service, and they are then put in a wholly different perspective, a different light. So it's like a presentation of Pittsburgh's finest that otherwise people would never know about. And we've had great success with that. And I might add that one of the accolades that comes back to us is when we see some of those resumes going out, they often mention that they were named a New Pittsburgh Courier Man or Woman of Excellence in the city of Pittsburgh. It goes a long way. So that's one little contribution factor that we are providing in terms of allowing people to see who exists within our community, the kind of talent that is here, the richness that they are ignoring because they choose not to want to see or go through the motions of properly finding the right folk. Doris knows she hosts a breakfast, monthly prior to this pandemic.
Our power breakfast meetings, yes.
Yes, and that's an opportunity for many of these business people to come together, network, and see one another and connect. That's been going on successfully for quite some time. So you have somebody in Doris Carson Williams who's been out there for a number of years now, actually opening doors for a number of people. But at the same time, the Courier has been exposing people of talent and a rich heritage, successful in their own right, that otherwise would never see the light of day. So
one of the first things we did, Rod, when Earl Buford came to town, we had him as a speaker. for
Right.
our power breakfast.
Right.
We wanted not only to introduce him to the small business network and the organized body of business owners, but to provide him an opportunity to build his own network. And he made some good contacts through that. We have to do more of that.
Absolutely.
Through a number of different ways.
I just want to connect a couple of gems that are being dropped here. I just feel so privileged to have the opportunity to listen to Doris and to Rod. So such wisdom from all of your years of experience. One of the things that I think is so important that's being mentioned now is that Pittsburgh is a relationship city. And I think it's something that's being alluded to right now in this moment, right? It's something that we have acknowledged and that we noted at Vibrant Pittsburgh through our Vibrant Index is something called the middle management bottleneck. And so essentially, regardless of if the CEO and the board of directors is calling for diversification of the pipeline and the C-suite for that matter, there are a group of individuals kind of in the middle of companies that perhaps are looking for people that look like them, that talk like them, that are more familiar, that they have relationships with, which we see more and more in this region, and not really being cognizant of it or having their own bias in place, making decisions that consistently will keep us from moving forward. There are a lot of programs that we can tout and that companies have in place to train up our talent, the talent that we know we have here in the region, but nobody's looking at that bottleneck, right? And training them to look beyond some of the things that they find more familiar and consider a talented person of color that looks like one of us on this call. And so thinking about the importance of building relationships and creating spaces across the aisle, one, I just want to acknowledge the fact that we've got to support each other in this particular work and continue to strengthen our relationships across Black Pittsburgh. And so, it's the reason that we're a member of the African American Chamber, and Earl sits on my board. We obviously subscribe to the Pittsburgh Courier. We've got to support each other and continue to push these positive narratives forward and share our resources amongst the spaces and places that we occupy to extend those relationships so that we can really stop this challenging issue that we know is happening within companies day in and day out, and keeping talented individuals from great opportunity.
You know what, Sabrina, you brought up an interesting point. Many of the CEOs, as we have had opportunities in some cases to meet with them, they get it. They understand it. They want to help do something. And they say, we will push that through the organization. But as it filters down in the organization, middle management oftentimes, and it could be their biases, but it's also, they have a buddy network of people that they do business with, and they don't want to disturb that. What we encourage them to do is look at the pie and just enlarge it and create another slice. Give us the opportunity for entry, and we will take it from there. And in a number of cases, we have done that recently, and we've got a couple members that are just really able to tout their wares about how successful doing that is, because they have met people, partnered with them, got an opportunity to get in the door, and as a result of showing their talents, they increase their worth within a company.
Well, I'm glad to hear.
Is there any evidence that things have changed locally to the extent that the number of people leaving, the young people in particular, leaving the city has reversed itself? Are there more people tending to stay here? Just a question I'm asking.
So based upon the numbers I've seen, Mr. Doss, the region has stabilized itself, and it looks as if the region is going to be growing. However, the city continues to lose population.
Okay.
But I'm also encouraged to hear Ms. Williams say that the CEOs get it, because I'm not convinced they do. So I'm at least happy to hear you believe some of them do.
I don't believe all of them do, but a number of them do.
Okay, well, that's
I
encouraging.
I agree. There are a number of CEOs that I've sat down with one-on-one who have plans in place, that are executing them, that get it, that are listening, and I'm asking them to lead their peers because there are a number that have not stepped up just yet, and it's time for them to.
So can you explain why they get it? I have my belief, which is that they're taking an economic hit. My understanding, and this is your space, not mine, but my understanding is in business, especially in corporate America now, diversity is good for business. And unfortunately, in Pittsburgh, we are one of the most least diverse places. And so I've heard of companies who choose not to locate here because of the lack of diversity. I've heard of companies who have a hard time keeping their minority workers because lack of diversity. And so, Ms. Mosby, since you touched upon it, I'm thinking they're getting to understand it because it's going to have, either it is now having a negative financial impact, or they see 20 years from now, the workforce won't be in place. Can you talk a little bit about the financial case for why diversity matters within these companies?
Absolutely. But first, I just want to say this. It is just a realistic fact that our country is becoming blacker and browner. And so in order for this region to thrive, to have an economic base and a workforce, we need to embrace and support diversity, to retain diverse talent here in this region, to attract diverse talent here in this region, or we will not be able to compete against other cities across the country that can and will and are doing that already. And that's our competition, right? And so what you're talking about is the fact that, I mean, there's been a ton of research that's been done to demonstrate that if it's done well, diversity and inclusion in the workplace can lead to increased revenue, reduced cost, greater innovation. And the reason for that is because essentially the more that your workforce looks like the customer that you serve, the more insight that you have, the better that you can serve them. So that's leadership from the top and individuals working and making decisions for you. I do believe that in the midst of what many of us have been calling the double pandemic, which is COVID and then also the racial unrest that we've experienced with the recent deaths of George Floyd, and now the attempted killing is what I've been saying of Jacob Blake. A different kind of diversity being good for business. It definitely, it's a difficult conversation to have, but one that we should be very clear about to ensure that this is not just a moment in which companies and business leaders are supporting this work and are laser focused on this work, but that this is a movement and this is a change in the right direction for us as a region in the country. And so what I mean by that is obviously there is a spotlight on the importance of protecting Black lives and the well-being of Black individuals, and that includes employees. And so that is where the idea of diversity being an imperative for our businesses comes from. I wholeheartedly believe that there are a number of business leaders here in this region, based on sitting down with them, getting a chance to get to know them, talking through the plans that they have in place for their companies, things that they've already done, right, their track record, that they not only believe in this work, but they want to see a real change within their companies, and they want to lead in this particular space, but they've just been unsuccessful for a variety of reasons. There are a number of companies where there's just not the same level of accountability or interest. It just hasn't been a part of an imperative for them at this point in time. And I feel like we obviously have not just the ability, we have the platform to hold their feet to the fire, to ask the question why. What exactly is it that you plan to do to continue to help to move this region forward? And if they're not essentially considering the importance of diversifying the workforce in 2020, I'm not sure that they plan on being in existence in 2030 or 2040, because it essentially is, it's not just what's to come, it's what's now, right? And so whether or not leaders are prepared for it, whether they're buying into this concept of diversity being good for business, whether it's revenue or whether it's the well-being of your workforce and those that you serve, your customers, it's here. It's what's absolutely necessary. The talented individuals that we have to fill our workforce, our workplaces, look like you and me.
Well, Sabrina, just a quick update on the economic impact. Within the last 2 hours, all the NBA teams have forfeited their games, and all the Major League Baseball is trying to do the same tonight.
Right.
So if that's not affecting economics, I don't know what is.
No, absolutely. My husband just told me that when he came home from work, and I mean, it just goes to show how the use of your platform and positioning power can
leveraging money
make a change, right? And so hitting folks where we know it matters, and that their pockets is going to make a difference for sure.
But let me make a comment for Earl and Rod and Marquise along those same lines, Sabrina. Let's talk about diversity for a moment. A lot of people that are young, talented professionals, they don't want to work in an environment with people that only look like them. They're looking for a diverse workforce to work with. There's been a number of articles written about the impact of diversity on corporations and what it means. If you have a diverse workforce and you address the product offerings for that workforce, it's amazing what can happen. You can increase not only productivity, but profitability for the individuals as well as the company. There was an article that came out recently that said, we are the third whitest environment in the country. We need to work on changing that. We've got people that maybe have moved outside of the city, but our region still has a nice base with people of color. We've got to make sure that these companies recognize diversity benefits them as well as helping to improve the region. And I'll stop there.
Let me weigh in because I come from a different perspective. I've had conversations with people who were hired as diversity officers, chiefs, and whatnot. In fact, I could tell you some heartbreaking stories once they got into the job. I've had private meetings with a number of these people who went in thinking that they were at least in a position to hire more African Americans. And sadly, diversity meant everybody but us. And I'm telling you, this is exactly what happened. Serena, you're smiling because you probably know it's true. We have a number of people of color in diversity officer positions. And quite honestly, it's women, it's Hispanics, it's Asians, it's everybody but us. Diversity does not include us to the same way EEO did. I'm telling you, I've had many a broken story. People came into my office, sat down, and poured their heart out about what they thought they were being hired to do, and found out it was totally different. So this is just another reality of what goes on. And that was black women and black men. I'm just giving it to you as straight as I can.
Yeah, Rod, the reason I'm smiling and I'm shaking my head is because earlier this year I released a 2020 regional action plan
for employers
to adopt, and I specifically said Black and African Americans as it relates to the population that I wanted to see impacted by the action plan because of what you've mentioned. We have to be very specific when talking about the population that we want to connect with opportunity, and that's been overlooked, quite frankly. And so I completely I agree that there is this notion of an expanded view of diversity, which I completely believe in. Obviously, having a variety of views, diversity seen and unseen, is most certainly quite important as we're talking about the employment imperative, equitable opportunities and compensation elevation. I'm talking about Black folks.
That's right.
At the city, the Commission on Racial Equity and the work that Councilman Lavelle and I have done to pass legislation saying that Black Pittsburgh matters is one of the first times in the history of our city we've ever talked about Black issues and used them. Up until last year or so, we never used the word Black. We used the word equity, inclusion, all these other buzzwords, but not specifically Black. I do have something I want to say, but before I want to ask the question, and then I'll make a statement about it. My question really is, we're talking about employment in terms of people who are eligible to participate in employment, but the Allegheny Conference said, you know, trying to recruit people to come to the region to work here is a priority. Again, I'll ask the question, Mr. Buford and Mr. Long, you're both transplants. Honestly, what's wrong with Pittsburgh? Why is it that people like yourselves don't want to come here? What do you think? What do you think the problem is? And now I'll make a statement, and anybody can after them can chime in. What's wrong with our city? Why is it so hostile to African Americans having a high quality of life? Let's be honest.
I'll defer to Marquise. He's been a little longer, but I have a statement as well.
Honestly, I would say I think it all goes back to Mr. Doss. I think it's fear of honestly Black people in general, not just the man. I think it's the opportunities here in Pittsburgh. People are not ready for them. People are not ready for the change. People are not ready to sit down, you know, take a step to the side. You know, I'm actually here because my wife is originally from Pittsburgh, which she drugged me here. But I will say this, through, as Ms. Saunders have talked about opportunities and network, that was one of the reasons why I have stayed here in Pittsburgh, because of the individuals, because of the African-American women and men that I have met through working, who have always had the opportunity to encourage me and tell me to keep on going. That's actually one of the things that kept me here in Pittsburgh. And I think when other transients are coming to Pittsburgh, they don't come in having that same opportunity, having those same connections. So it's easy for them to say, you know what, this is not the place for me. I'm gonna go down to Atlanta or Charlotte, where there seems to be a little bit more acceptance of the Black person.
Great points, Marquise. It's interesting coming from another city, which to me was even worse on this conversation. And so the interesting part about that is in this job and coming to the city, the arms are open. So right now I'm on a new guy wave still. So any call I make, those doors are open. But will that continue? That's what I'm looking out for. So in the next 5 to 10 years, will this continue? Well, why I'm evaluating if it's going to continue, as Sabrina said earlier, building these networks, insulating myself with everyone on this call right now and others in this community who look like we look and are doing good things, make sure we build our ecosystem stronger and better. That'll make me want to continue to stay, because where I came from was worse and it didn't have that ecosystem. But if it doesn't continue, if it doesn't grow, like, well, you know, we know where the consequences are there, we're going to go somewhere else. But that's my goal. I'm going to continue to watch this, because right now, you know, I have the momentum of people wanting to open the door. And as Mr. Doss probably knows, that, you know, that door closes fast sometimes.
Yes, it does.
So that's my well-rounded way of answering that question. I'm watching, I'm paying attention, but having you folks working with me is going to help make that decision easier to stay here and continue to grow. One last thing I want to say, just kind of off course a bit. It's one, you know, personal work is lots of grants and training dollars and all these other things. But we also have wage subsidy for employers. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to start providing more of these wage subsidy situations for Black businesses, minority businesses. So I want to have Doris and I start talking about some of that with her members. We want to start utilizing the more tools that we haven't utilized to any kind of capacity or scale over the years. So it's time for some ideas to come out of this, or to better utilize our resources for this topic.
And I just want to say one thing before you go, Reverend Councilman Burgess. So you asked what kept me here, and really that's my wife and my kids. But the one thing that I want to challenge all of us to is not our own kids, but the kids that are out in the community. Because sometimes what I know happens is a little African-American boy or a little African-American girl in Homewood may not have the same opportunities as my son. And I'm not reaching out to that little African-American boy or that little African-American girl to give them the opportunity to connect them with our networks. And I think through the Learn and Earn program, that's a valuable opportunity to have our young people see that there are opportunities out here that can benefit them. And I also think that we, again, I see a lot of Black faces here. When you go to a PPS school, especially Alderdice, you don't see a lot of Black faces in Alderdice. You don't see a lot of Black faces in CEO positions or in vice presidents or president positions. But I think this is the opportunity to take this platform and show our faces in our communities to those young people so that they can have something to aspire to be. And I think that really do start with us, especially here in Pittsburgh.
So I want to share a story I say when I talk about this to other people. I say, imagine what it would be like if lions chose zoos instead of zoos choosing lions, right? So a lion goes to a zoo and he goes and sees all the lions are starving, they're in substandard housing, they're not fed, they're not fed well, they're getting beat by the handlers. And then they go to another zoo. And in that zoo, the lions are living in plush circumstances, they're well fed. There's pretty female lioness there. And they ask the lion, which one you're going to pick? Well, the lion's going to pick the zoo where people are prospering. I think the same is true in Pittsburgh, that one of the problems we have, and I believe this, is that the African American communities in Pittsburgh are struggling. And that gives an image of Black people struggling in our city. And until we rebuild Black communities in Pittsburgh so that when Black people come here, they see Black business districts, they see Black middle class, they see a place where I have 4 children, where my children, and they're all adults, they can go and date and go to a concert and they can be around other Black people safely in nice things, to a nice restaurant owned by Black people and shop at nice clothing stores owned by Black people. And so I'm of the belief, I am laser-like focused on rebuilding traditional African American communities. I really don't think that we're going to be able to tackle this issue of diversity until just on a fairness basis, that we do not have spaces and places for Black people, owned by Black people, for them to go and live and participate in. That's my thought. That's my story about lions.
I'm glad to hear you say, Reverend Burgess, rebuild. And the reason I say that is I'm a Pittsburgh native. I mean, I went to Westinghouse High School. I moved away, went to school in Connecticut, lived there for about 12 years and moved back here. When I was growing up, you could go down to the corner drugstore that was Black owned. And my mother used to always tell me the story about Billy Eckstein. She'd say he'd go to the cleaners, Barnett Cleaners, and get his pants pressed. He'd go down on Heron Avenue and get his shoes shined. He'd go to Nesbitt's and eat his meal. There was a thriving commerce district of Black business owners that we watched evaporate, as a lot of Black professionals who at one time you knew because they lived in the community, they moved outside into the suburbs. So that nucleus that we once had of African American professionals living in a concentrated area is no longer there. It's more dispersed now. So to rebuild, we have to think differently about how we rebuild and help people to identify who those players are.
When you talk about rebuilding, there was an effort some years ago to rebuild Homewood Avenue. It was going very well. And then something happened out of Homewood Avenue. Certain element of the community started breaking into the sidewalls of the buildings and stealing from the owners. They cut holes in the roof of the buildings and came through the roof and threatened. There were business owners that had to sleep overnight in their shops. They literally canceled out business in those communities. Homewood was really looking pretty good during that particular time. But at the same time, you had an element that did not allow for anybody to prosper. Now, I don't know necessarily that that element is still exists because we haven't had that same framework of entrepreneurship moving into an area like it did at that particular time. Homewood was really trying to come back, Black owned.
They're working on it now.
What's that?
They are working on it now.
Okay, but I'm hoping that we have that element in check because we cannot rebuild with a certain cadre of folk who continue to tear it down and does not allow for any growth or regrowth or rebirth in our communities.
Well, and I won't talk about this at length for a different show, but in order to do this, you have to do multiple interventions all at one time, right? You can't just build businesses. You have to do employment and businesses and affordable housing and social services and drug rehab and early childhood and, early child intervention and home ownership. You have to put all of these interventions at the same time at scale. And Larmer, I think, is the best example of what we've been able to do. At least in my district, Larmer is the best example. I do think Homewood's next. I think the Homewood Business District is ripe for investment, as is Center Avenue on the Hill and a few other places across our city. I think we can begin to rebuild African-American communities using the business districts as cores.
Towards that end, Reverend, as we all clearly know, unemployment within the Black community was higher than the average before COVID hit. And unfortunately, with COVID, many were either laid off, furloughed, lost their jobs, and are simply underemployed. Real quickly, Marquise and/or Earl, do you know of any current companies, organizations that are looking to hire during these times that anyone watching, because we've received a lot of comments and there's some questions I want to get to from the public, but during this time where people are going to be looking for work and needing opportunities, are you all aware of any opportunities that people could go to right now?
Right now, we are actively seeking about 2,500 individuals to work at Amazon in their blue badge positions. These are the $15 an hour jobs with benefits and additional paid training. Some of you may be aware of that. So our career link centers and a lot of our partners that we are funding for training are coming together to fulfill those openings. Obviously, the issue is transportation. So we're working with Amazon, a couple strategies there. One being where they're providing transportation for the last mile with the bus stops. We're also working on some crews that work around the clock for the various shifts. So that's one. That's a small one, but still 2,500 openings is 2,500 openings. They're full time. We're also working with, and this is still on the retail side with Sheets. They have a couple hundred openings right now that we're starting to get ready for. Right before this call, I had a conversation with 10 of the large employers in town, the U.S. Steels, the Pitt Ohios, et cetera, about some new initiatives to fulfill their openings that we're trying to work with them on, and how do we get the word out to the folks that's listening here right now. So hopefully we'll be bringing on more information and working through each of your districts and your constituents on how to get folks in these openings, whether it's training, whether it's direct hire, whether it's a combination thereof, or if it's upgrading folks who already work there into better positions and then opening their positions. So we'll have more to come, but those are the big ones that jump out right now because of the numbers I mentioned.
Councilman Burgess and Councilman Lavelle, and to our other guest panelists, Rod and Earl and Sabrina and Marquise, I'm sorry. I told Councilman I would have to excuse myself at 7. I'm enjoying this.
Good.
I'm enjoying this, and please have me back.
We will, Doris. Thank you very much. You're a rare treasure for our city.
Absolutely.
Bye, my friend.
Great to see you, Doris.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you. And we do want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know we told you it lasts about an hour. So I do want to bring Micah Campbell in. But
before you bring Micah, Councilman Lavelle, I just want to mention, just on the conversation about jobs that are available now, Vibrant Pittsburgh also has a job posting on on our website, vibrantpittsburgh.org, that has a featured list of 50 available jobs right now that our members are seeking to fill, currently looking for diverse talent. And obviously, those are available currently, but you can also look at our members list to go directly to their career sites to take a look at opportunities that they have available at our almost 70 member companies as well.
And I just wanted to share real quick,
Thank you,
as Earl had talked about the Amazon, the Sheets, and those big hiring things. We did develop a hiring specifically portal for COVID. So if you go to the PA Career Link site, there are opportunities that specifically because of the pandemic where individuals can go and see which companies are currently hiring right now. So if you're looking for an opportunity, that's definitely an avenue that you can take advantage of.
Thank you. Thank you both. Micah, are you with us?
Yes.
And just so everyone is aware, Micah Campbell-Smith is an intern in Reverend Burgess's office and ultimately the producer of this series. If not for her, we would not be able to pull this off. So I do want to publicly thank her. But you said there have been questions, live questions?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Lavelle. We have a few live questions here. One of the first, I think I'll direct to our team joining us from Partner for Work. There was sort of an interest in learning what Black youth in Pittsburgh can do right now. How best do you think we can engage Black youth in Pittsburgh for employment and sort of working towards a positive positive resume building right now? What can we do right now during the pandemic?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think, obviously we just completed our Learn and Earn Summer Jobs program. That's supported by both of our elected officials on this call. We celebrated, I believe, over 1,700, and I believe each individual that went through that collected about $1,100 this summer. So that's this summer. We would love to do that year round and something as large as that. We're also, as we talk about these other companies I mentioned, Amazon, Sheets, we want to make sure that information is getting out there. So, Councilman LaBelle knows this. So as we develop the workforce center in the Hill, was one of those avenues where we start to bring more employers and opportunities there, especially for young people. That's one thing about, for all the workforce that's happening, that 16 to 24-year-old population is often neglected. No matter all the good things we're doing, it's still not the scale we need. So one of the things we often counsel people on is start somewhere. You're not going to jump into an apprenticeship tomorrow. So it's okay to start at a big box company or some other thing. And so we're trying to really push these pathway conversations. But all that said, I still think we need more of a concentrated effort on something more around transitional jobs, where we can really control the job sites and where young people will go, the amount of hours, the right work. So it really becomes more of a career development and not just a job. And so that's something I'm hoping that we'll be able to announce down the road with the help of a lot of folks on this call, the development of a really large transitional jobs programming or networking situation that focused on 16 to 24-year-olds year round continuously. But that's not in place now. It's happening, but it's not happening at the scale I think we need or want and desire.
Understood. And another question that we had was specifically about Black women, for sort of the prejudice and racial inequality that Black Pittsburgh face. And I'm opening this up broadly in the Pittsburgh community. Also about sort of the equality from a business perspective, Black-owned banks in Pittsburgh. What do, if we talk about home buying and loan qualification, what Black institutions do we have to go through to work towards home ownership, et cetera?
Well, one time there was a black bank. It did not survive. It was here for a while. There was a great deal of interest in trying to promote it. We had some very talented people that helped pull it together, organized it, funded it, got it off and running. But unfortunately, it did not survive. It was a very sad departure for the city, but it existed. It was an effort led by Richard Barber was one of the key people who tried to make it happen, and it just did not maintain. Very unfortunate.
The only other resource I know of that's sort of Black owned, Black managed is the Hill District Federal Credit Union.
Right.
They are able to assist in home ownership opportunities and helping people prepare for mortgages, working with their credit repair and other things along those lines. So they would be a resource. If we could take one more question.
Ms. Saunders, perhaps you could shed a little bit of light on what the prejudices Black women in Pittsburgh face in the workplace.
Sure. I'm not sure I can do the greatest job right now to talk about the plight of the Black woman. In this moment, I feel like I mean, my heart is really heavy just today, as I think about the challenges that we face in general. What I will tell you is after the gender equity report came out and finding out that I was pregnant, and recognizing the potential challenges that I didn't even know that I had as a Black woman living in Pittsburgh as it relates to the mortality rate, and my voice and my opinion as it relates to medical matters being potentially ignored or devalued, it changed the way I thought about my position here as a Black woman in the region, not just as a professional, but as a person. I've always answered questions about potential challenges of being a Black leader that's female, that's also young in this region. And I can speak to examples of situations where I was ignored, or I was thought to be the intern, or in the wrong place. But one of the things that I was not ready for was the reality that something that I could not in any way, shape, or form prevent related to my own health was connected to my race and gender here in this particular region, here in Pittsburgh specifically, the place that I didn't choose to be born, that I was born because of where my family is from. I almost was dealt a potential death sentence because I decided I wanted to have a family. Thinking about those kinds of disparities, the fact that decisions that are made about Black women's health are connected to bias and prejudice, certainly are alarming. It rings an alarm, I think, for all of us, especially for me. And I think that it needs to very much be a part of the conversations that we're having about Black Pittsburgh and why Black Pittsburgh matters. It's certainly top of mind for me. As a Black female leader, I will tell you that I find that some of the other women leaders that happen to be Black in this region, and I share a lot of common experiences. One being being offered opportunities that are already in failing positions, right? So being asked to come in and lead in a space that is failing, to fix a problem, to rebound a challenge that no one expects you to be able to lead. My challenge at Vibrant Pittsburgh is to essentially make Pittsburgh a place of choice for people of color, for Black folks that are here and those that potentially might want to come. That's an uphill battle. So if you're wondering what it's like to be a Black woman in Pittsburgh, my job alone is a great example of what we face.
Thank you. I think that's it for our discussion in the comments here.
Thank you very much. Before wrapping up, is there any last comments anyone has or wants to share?
Yes, I'd like to thank both you councilmen for allowing the city to become exposed to Black Pittsburgh matters through the pages of the Courier. You've done an outstanding job of writing articles that have resonated well. They're thoughtful, provocative, and it's just what we need at this particular time. Thank you both for taking the lead on keeping the city informed about a very key matter, Black Pittsburgh matters.
I just want to echo Mr. Doss. Thank you again for the opportunity, the platform, and from a partner perspective, either myself, Marquise, are always available. Bring us on, even just to give information if we need to.
Thank you, and we certainly will. We thank you for your partnership, Mr. Doss.
Absolutely.
With that being said, we do want to wrap up this evening. We've gone a little over the hour we promised we would keep you, but I want to thank you all for watching and participating. I want to thank all our guests on today's show. I want to thank specifically Ms. Doris Carson Williams from the African American Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Long and Mr. Buford from Partner for Work, Mr. Doss from the New Pittsburgh Courier, and Ms. Saunders Mosby from Vibrant Pittsburgh. In order to have a significant investment in the Black community, it is imperative that we make our community safe and peaceful, and we also must make it prosperous economically. Myself, Reverend Burgess, and I believe everyone on this show is proving that we are absolutely committed to rebuilding our Black communities in Pittsburgh for Black people, by Black people, with our partners and allies. And I just want to thank you all for your time.
I also want to thank all of you for watching and participating in this town hall meeting. Remember, you can watch this show on Facebook, the city's YouTube channel, or the city's cable channel. A new meeting will occur every Wednesday. And by working together, united in purpose, we can transform our city, strengthen it for all of its residents. Pittsburgh can only be a city for all when it becomes a city where Black Pittsburgh matters. Good night, stay safe, and be blessed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.